Firstly, isn't it nice to be here? Taiwan never looked so beautiful, in a film which has often circulated in grotty grindhouse prints, scarred, faded and spliced to hell. Not to disparage the peculiar pleasures of the grindhouse experience, but seeing a film like this looking radiantly new is a genuine thrill. The land of A Touch of Zen, of course, is not a real geographic place, but the mindscape of a filmmaker, King Hu. Having established his skill in Hong Kong with Come Drink With Me, and cemented his fame in Taiwan with Dragon Inn, Hu seems to have decided to explode the genre he had mastered and then sift through the fragments to really see what they could be made to do. The film's music score immediately marks it as a more sophisticated piece of work than its predecessor. Gone is the needle-drop alternation of Ennio Morricone and Modest Mussorgsky's greatest hits, in favour of a beautiful, measured and coherently Eastern score. From his previous movies, Hu continues the theme of political chicanery and outcast heroes. An evil, all-powerful eunuch, a kick-ass young woman, a central location to bind the first two acts together, a wide band of characters, and a spectacular array of fight scenes. But the first thing you notice is that the first half of this epic, almost a full hour, has no fight scenes at all. At the 3/4 hour mark, somebody shoves the blind fortune teller, but that barely qualifies as a skirmish. What Hu substitutes for martial artistry is mystery. The shadowy mood of a ghost story, paired with a romance, investigated in the manner of a detective story. If Dragon Inn showed a foreign influence, it was most strongly from the recent westerns of Sergio Leone. With A Touch of Zen, King Hu seems to have been looking at Val Lewton, or perhaps The Innocents. A hushed exploration of abandoned buildings at night with a prowling camera and a fascination with the tricks a moving light source can play. The world is eerie, imbued with life and possible ill intentions. Come Drink With Me and Dragon Inn both centred most of their action around spacious inns, places where varied characters with different agendas can come into contact. Here, Hu replaces the inn with an abandoned fort, where several down-at-heel characters are staying rent-free. The blind fortune teller, who is really an exiled general, the young woman and her aged mother, also fugitives from justice, and the hero and his rather querulous mum. In this setting, Hu concocts a series of sinister comings and goings, shadowy assignations, and possible hauntings. Suspense simmers on a low flame through the drama's first half, with the exact nature of the puzzle not even clearly stated. The mystery being explored may well be, what do women talk about? As the plot only really kicks in once we get a long withheld scene between the hero's nagging mother and his prospective love interest. In Western drama, informal theatrical wisdom has proposed the dubious maxim that no scene with two women alone will work, as nothing can possibly happen in such a scenario. A Touch of Zen disproves this. its entire narrative depends on a silent decision made here, in the hero's absence, which will result, ultimately, in fatherhood for one character and victory for another. Astonishingly for this genre, our hero is a lover, not a fighter, an artist and scholar rather than a soldier. This might be squared with standard wuxia practice, if at some point he underwent a rigorous training montage and emerged as an indomitable swordsman, but this never happens. In Dragon Inn, Shi Chun could snatch an arrow out of the air with chopsticks, or kill a man with a cup. Here, his military prowess is purely intellectual, as he uses his knowledge of military history to plan the central battle, using traps and deceit to confuse the enemy and sap their morale. Mostly, he's just a witness to the struggles of heroes and henchmen. It's a persistent strategy of Hu's in this film. Nearly every conflict is viewed by some distant, concerned spectator. As is the nature of these films, we gradually rise up the food chain of warriors towards some kind of previously undreamt-of final boss. And as we go, characters who seemed impossibly lethal and dexterous get sidelined, standing by helplessly as new and even more amazing fighters take center stage. I think this policy makes each fight seem more impressive than the last, not only because each is more crazily unreal, but because witnessing it through the eyes of a relatively powerless onlooker redoubles our awareness of our own powerlessness as viewers. We must sit passively watching, unable to intervene without putting a foot through the screen. As the principal bystander, the debonair and sensitive Shi Chun makes for a likeable companion. Hu emasculates him ruthlessly, saddling him with a domineering parent and a set of skills that are bound to look rather unimpressive next to the flying warriors. He's used for a one-night stand and gets left holding the baby, and when he does facilitate a crushing victory for his team, confrontation with the bloodshed he's made possible induces in him a miniature nervous breakdown. Of course, his role in the battle, planning the attacks, running a propaganda campaign with his mother's gossip as principal weapon, and booby-trapping the fort with infernal machines, pop-up dummies, and all the fake spook apparatus of a particularly epic edition of Scooby-Doo, is not particularly noble. This gentle leading man connects up with a figure at the far end of the film's ladder of greatness. The yellow-clad abbot, who can run on air, induce psychedelic visions, and who bleeds gold, is theoretically above earthly conflicts, but can be induced to fight when all else fails. It's probably impossible to make a pacifist action film. The demands of the genre trump any message-mongering. But Hu does at least suggest that violence should be a last resort, that it has destructive consequences even for those who survive it unharmed, and that spiritually enlightened beings despise the use of force. In spite of all this, the film is happy to serve up innumerable gripping duels and one full-scale massacre. Hu's camera rushes up to the action in childlike excitement. And as in his previous work, he alternates sweeping movement with choppy, socky, fast-cut montage. Sometimes the point being made is that the antagonists are too quick for the human eye, but Hu never lets the fencing degenerate into fast cuts of blurry limbs. There's always a vivid sense of specific movement and purposeful action, even if the editing employs sleight of hand to sell us the impossible. Film scholar and Hong Kong cinema enthusiast David Bordwell points out that Eastern movies are partial to having characters enter from frame bottom, as well as left and right, and who obliges with some pop-up appearances here. The widescreen image affords Hu great opportunities for spacious composition. He loves placing big close-ups at the extreme left and right of frame, making us watch the movie like a tennis match. Wuxia may be a spectator sport, but the best directors try to get us physically involved, getting us to feel the force of a blow, the speed of a pursuit, the strain of muscles, or the disorientation of falling or spinning. Do we grip the armrests in tense scenes? Do our palms sweat? This is immersive, muscular filmmaking. In a way, his blocking of dialogue is no different from his approach to fights, creating a dynamic, rhythmic dance of characters and camera, in which editing can provide a backbeat. Perhaps this is why he can spin out the movie for so long without clearly establishing the issues, the characters, and the threat, or featuring any action set pieces. Just the movement of characters across, into, and out of the frame is so beautiful and hypnotic in his hands. He's carefully preparing us for the fact that this is what the film is really about: bodies in motion, observed by an eye that's in frenetic motion itself. Some aficionados of fight choreography will find the rudimentary wirework and casual use of off-screen trampolines naive, primitive, or dated. But when what the characters are doing is impossible anyway, do we really need to see it portrayed with photographic realism? 70s audiences were happy to accept their fantasy in the spirit in which it was offered. We're never going to believe these superhuman leaps are possible, so does it matter if they don't look completely real? Sure, we know exactly how the tricks are being done, but the same is true of modern computer effects. Innocence has its own appeal. Since Hu, like Shakespeare and David Lean, likes to visualize the themes of his film using the environment and the action of nature to heighten the emotion, enlightenment is persistently connected here with the flares and halations caused by sunlight hitting the lens. This is never more obvious than when a villain, running with the sun at his back, encounters the holy men, who have a bigger and brighter sun at their backs. Astronomically impossible, but cinematically sublime. The monk's lens flare even has its own sound effect. In a medium where nothing counts unless it can be seen or heard, characters accompanied by loud light are obviously of supreme importance. Elsewhere, Hu uses mist, rain, ice, flights of little birds, moonlight to create atmosphere and a vivid sense of place and time. The movie is more expansive than its predecessors, even breaking free of chronology for a lengthy flashback, and eventually abandoning even its fortress locale for mountains, rivers, and desert. This sudden influx of new landscape is one of the tactics by which the film continues to refresh itself as it unfolds. The fights, impressive as they are, might not be enough to sustain interest, even with the dizzyingly heightened skills of the participants. Ultimately, the film's journey takes it inward. To to a psychedelic, psychotronic conclusion. The negative images suggest a film flipping over and turning inward on itself, as a spiritual dimension supersedes the heroic bloodshed and mere physical struggle. Whose camera has already been so ecstatic, swooping and swooning over its subjects, that transcending concrete imagery for a flight into abstraction was perhaps the only direction left to go. The miracle is that this works. Rather than seeming a merely fashionable indulgence or a desperate attempt to trump what's gone before, a hint of real magic and real madness is evoked. For me, this is a more satisfying ending than Dragon Inn's amusingly abrupt finish, where the bad guy's block is chopped off, immediately followed by an indecently fast sunset and fade out. The contrast marks out the change in Who's approach from film to film. Both films are primarily concerned with variations of movement, motivated by a quest for cinematic beauty rather than narrative sense or credibility. A Touch of Zen surpasses its predecessors by taking that quest beyond the bounds of story. As if to offer its characters, and us, a glimpse of the experimental movie playing on the screen next door.